live, Dan.
Hey, hello everyone, and hey, welcome to Disc and WHY.os Part 2. You know, we had such a great session a few weeks ago with Dr. Gary Sanchez and Dr. Ira Wolfe talking about the value. I think, Ira, you called it the peanut butter and jelly of assessments. Such a great marriage. And we had such a great turnout and so much demand for more depth that we decided to do a second part. So today we're going to go into a little bit more depth, and we've got an agenda for you guys that I think you're going to enjoy. We want to talk about a couple of things today. Number one, most important thing is what's the value of these assessments? And our guests today know the value of assessments. We're going to actually take two coaches live through their WHY.os and their DISC and talk about how the two have meshed for them. And these are two coaches that are very experienced in DISC, been using it for a long time, and they've recently started using WHY.os. Ira, you've been using DISC for over 40 years, and I loved your comment when you posted about this event. You said WHY.os is like the Chat GPT of assessments because it really of self-empowerment. And I want to hear more about that. So here's our agenda today. What we're going to do, we're going to talk about the value of the DISC assessment, the value of the WHY.os discovery, and we're going to hear from the experts about it. And then we're going to ask some questions from our guests to talk about why they're different and how they're different. And then more importantly, how do we use them together so that we get that exponential growth from that? So Ira, as I said earlier, you've been using DISC for 40 years, but what is the value of the DISC assessment to a coach?
Well, thanks, Dan. It's a great setup, and a lot of this is still evolving. As I said, I'm still a work in progress. But like many other people, they're familiar with DISC or Myers-Briggs or many other tools like that, and the core of personal development, professional development is always self-awareness. Emotional intelligence. We've been hearing from Daniel Goleman for the last 30 years about how EQ or EI is so critical for our development, and that differentiates successful and not successful people. Well, all these tools are really, really good for self-awareness, of understanding who we are, how other people may see us, and even how we might change our behavior. But the missing connection for me was how do we put that into action? Mm-hmm. What do we do with that? Knowing I'm extroverted or introverting, or knowing I'm a DC versus an IS or a DI is all good stuff, but that doesn't make you whole. It doesn't at the end of the day fulfill you. It just helps you. It helps you communicate. It helps you understand yourself. And it hit me the other day because somebody, and I think it might have been one of the people that was on the last call, said, what's the difference between self-awareness and self-empowerment? And I had to think a little bit, but self-empowerment really is empowering yourself to do what you want to do. But as strange as it is, and as somewhat knowledgeable as I am, and having been on this path for 40 years of using DISC, but even 30 years of being in the business of assessments, and helping people understand themselves and helping companies hire the right people. The one thing that we ignored was, how do we get people to do what they want to do? And so self-empowerment is really the fuel, the power behind self-awareness. Without it, we go through motions being aware. I know there's a problem. I know I'm unhappy. I know there's something missing. What do I do about it? And that's the why. So long way around there, but that's my story.
No, I love that. That's a great setup for our next question, because Gary, you're the founder and CEO of the WHY Institute that brought us the WHY.os discovery. Tell us for in a brief time, what's the value of the WHY.os discovery to coaches from all your experience that you've had presenting this to coaches?
Ira, do you want to bring that little slide up, and I'll just go through a couple of things real quickly with everybody to get you some visuals as well. You know, one of the most important things about knowing somebody's WHY.os is making better connections faster, better connections with yourself, better connections with prospects, better connections faster with clients, better connections faster with your marketplace, your ideal clients. So let me give you some examples. You know, so often our relationships can start like this, and even maybe start like this, where we're butting heads with each other. And what we really want is to have it start like this, right? Wouldn't it be nice if all of our relationships started just like this? And that's where we can make better connections faster. Even if we're different, we can still have great connections when you know who somebody is. And so when it comes to coaching, really the way to do that is, number one, understand yourself. Number two, understand your prospect. And number three, if you have a team, understand your team so you can move forward faster. So understanding yourself. DISC, Myers-Briggs, Kolbe, Strength Finders, they are great assessments. We use them. We like them. Those are how you take action, not why you take action. So when you start with the why and the WHY.os, then the DISC will make even more sense, will be even better when you start with WHY.os, because you'll know motivation. You'll know why you do what you do, whereas the DISC is more how you do what you do. And then when it comes to working with prospects, if you can understand not only how they want to be communicated to, but why they do what they do, you can connect even faster with them and at a deeper level. And the same thing when it comes to building your team. If you put people in a place that you know they will love what they're doing, you'll build an inspired team where people have unlimited energy for what you're doing or what they're doing. And that's how you can move forward faster. So that's a quick answer. I know we could dive a lot deeper into that, but we've got other things that we want to cover today. But that's just a quick bringing people up to speed. Is WHY.os is super helpful in helping you as a coach have better connections faster.
And Gary, if I can just tag on to that, your first couple slides, as I said, we could have used that for just a disc only presentation or a WHY.os only presentation. And what I used to talk about, and for those who were on the last call know that as well, but DISC is really just 4 different languages. We call it the universal language, and it's like 4 different languages. So if all of a sudden, Gary, you started to speak Chinese and I started to speak Russian, and I wouldn't understand what you were saying, you didn't understand what I was saying, no one on the call would understand anything. Our intentions could be right. We were using the right words in our language, but they weren't right for the other person. So I used to talk about that DISC was like the key that you put into the door to unlock it, and somebody then cracks it open. There's a chain on the door. We're starting to talk. We're starting to break that down. We're not quite at the stage where you had the hugging, but at least we weren't butting heads like this. And then hopefully through understanding DISC or their preferred communication style, they'll unlatch it, open the door, and welcome you in. And now you can start dealing with the why. People will share that. I'm not going to share my why to somebody who I don't like, or I think that might use it in retaliation or retribution or use it against me. I'm not even going to be bothered with that conversation. And the older you get, you have less of those conversations. So, I think, whether you start with DISC or why, I don't know how you do it without both of them. And that's the key. I'm just so excited about that. And that's why we're here. So,
well, Ira, that leads to my next question, because I wanted to ask this question because you've been using DISC for over 40 years, and you've only been using WHY.os for the last couple of years. What makes you make the comment that WHY.os is like the ChatGPT of self-empowerment?
Well, one is I never really thought a whole lot about what the difference between self-empowerment and self-awareness until maybe the last year or two. And part of it was the introduction to the why. Part of it was I sat down and wrote a chapter about it for the book, which at the end, well, we can give the link to everybody, and they can order it for free. It's a new book that's coming out. But I really, we tend to just throw out terms. You know, it's EI. Oh, it's self-awareness. Oh, it's self-empowerment. But there are fine differences for it. And I think the pandemic was sort of the wake-up call that there were a lot of people that I knew were they're very smart people. They're very intelligent. They had high EQ, but they struggled. It's like, what's my next chapter? What do I do next? I thought I had it, but now the environment changed, my perspective changed, my job changed, my life changed, whatever it might have been. Something changed, and all of a sudden they were self-aware that they didn't know where they were going. And one is they probably really didn't know their why. I mean, and again, it's not the holy grail, it's not the magic bullet. It's like, oh, now I got it. But it gave people direction. And you know, as I said before, it's the fuel, it's the power behind what do I want to do. And at least it says, you know, do I turn right or left? And then go, you'd be better off going left. And so at least you can start down that path and go down that journey that way.
Hey, there's a question in the chat that I want to make sure we ask you, because you're here, and I don't know if this is someone that's related to you, but they're asking. It's Tanya Wolfe.
No,
she says, hey, how does WHY.os compare to Driving Forces, which is a part of DISC? Driving Forces is around the why behind the behavior. So as a resident DISC expert, let's let you answer that one from Tanya.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Tanya, we are not related. We've actually never met, but she's been a longtime follower of me and a great connection. She always asks tough, great questions. Basically, I'm not sure. I mean, if we're talking about driving forces, there's a couple different names for this. There's a second part of this, and I actually wrote a book on it. We used to call it business values and motivators. Now there's business motivators. I think driving forces is another kind of form of that. Tanya can correct me if I'm not wrong, if I'm wrong, but I know there's other people that are familiar with the business motivators or variations of that. It's based on a model by Edward Spranger. It's about 120 years old. And it looked at, what do I value? Do I value learning? Do I value money? Do I value power? Do I value community? Do I value traditions? Do I value the aesthetics, my environment? That was the basics of it. And it just said, what do I value in life? What's going to keep me going? And I would say prior to my introduction to the WHY.os, I said that's what it is that one of my highest values is economic. It's utilitarian. So partly it's money, but partly is it useful? Is there a utility to this? Do I get an ROI from my investment? But another one is high social, which fits with the contribute and why. But I look to how I want to be paid for what I do well, but I want to make sure other people benefit as well as me. It's not just about me holding all the cards, but I want to make sure that I share those and other people can benefit. And that's the short of it. I think that's what driving forces is. It still doesn't define what I want out of that. I mean, it says I could be utilitarian, I can be social, I can be theoretical, but again, it's just like a street sign. It didn't give me enough meaning, and it wasn't. When people say, well, when people say, what do I do with it? This is really, really interesting. And I know what I am, but what do I do with it? Gary, you asked that question the other day. What do I do with it now? And that's the problem. The connecting piece is really the WHY.os. Because once you have that high level of self-awareness and you go, now I get it. I understand how I am, how other people feel about me, what I can do. but what action steps do I take for me to feel more fulfilled? Or if I'm a coach, what can I do to help other people so they don't walk away saying, hi, I'm DI and I'm utilitarian and individualistic. And you go, great. Yep, that resonates. That's who I am. I am who I am. Now what?
Right. No, that's so good. So, Gary, you talked about in your introduction about the importance of WHY.os, and Ira alluded to it, to connect with your ideal client, to connect with your company, with your employees. Can you talk a little bit more about how knowing your WHY.os helps you understand your employees, your clients better?
Yeah. So when you know somebody's WHY.os, you know the language that they speak. So you know what words you need to use in order to connect with them. So, for example, my why is to find a better way and share it. How I do that is by making things clear and understandable. And ultimately, what I bring are simple solutions. So my why is better way, my how is clarify, and my what is simplify. So if you want to connect with me, if you want to propose an idea to me, you better show me how it's better. You better show me how it's clear, and you better show me how it's simple and easy to use, or I'm not in. I won't hear it. I won't feel heard. I won't understand it. And so, but if you do, then I will definitely be interested. And so it gives you a very clear, easy, simple, logical way to connect with people that you can use in many different situations. But then you can take that's on an individual level. And we're going to do this here in a minute, right, Dan? We're going to take a matrix. We're going to show the WHY.os matrix, and where we added DISC to it, so that once you know the WHY.os of all your team members, you can really quickly see, where are we strong? Where are we not so strong? Do we have the right people in the right place doing the right things where they love what they do? If not, where do we move them? Who might we want to bring on as a new team member? It demystifies everything for you and really quickly shows you who you have on your team and how you can play at the highest level. So for those of you that are listening, if you were to look at any of our video feeds of Dan or Ira or myself, what happens is you create a narrative around what you think you see. You look at our glasses, our hair, the way we're dressed, the way we talk, you create a narrative, and then that's who we become. Mm-hmm. But when you know the WHY.os, you can strip that away, and it'll bring forward who you're really talking to and how to help them at the highest level. Does that make sense, Dan?
That makes perfect sense. And I quoted you, Gary, in the post about this. I love this quote. Transformation isn't about you trying to be someone you want to be. Transformation is about being you. But in order to be you, you have to know who you are. Yep. And that happens when you know your WHY.os. And I think you hit that on the head as you were explaining that.
I'm not a huge fan of change, because I don't know that change happens very often or at all. I'm not sure about that. I mean, and in some situations, yes, if you're at rock bottom and things need to change, but in general, do people change? And do they even need to change? You know, why not just understand who you are and be the best version of who you were meant to be?
Right.
So much easier than trying to change to be somebody that you think you should be or want to be.
So Gary, that's so interesting, because and I agree with you, but it also immediately took me to this course I'm currently doing. A couple of people know I'm taking a certification course in neuroscience of how can we retrain our brain? How can we rewire our brain? Neuroplasticity. And the fact is that what we want out of life, our why, our behaviors, we're not looking at changing those. What we're looking is how do we create better habits to get what we want? Because some of our old habits that we had don't work.
Mm-hmm. So let me add to that. I had a patient when I was a dentist who was the head of the pain clinic here in Albuquerque for 40 years. saw many, many, many thousands of patients. And I asked him one day, I said, what percentage of all the patients you saw for all those years actually got better? What do you think he said?
None, very few.
Less than 1%.
Yep.
Really?
He said they just don't change. They won't change what they're doing. What I would tell them is they would have to go out and walk a block and add a block every day. And when they get up to 5 miles, they'll be healed. None of them would do it. Well, the ones that did got better, which was less than 1%. The rest did not. So why try to get somebody to change? Maybe help them figure out who they really are and then be the best version of that. So much easier, so much better for me. That's just how I feel.
And I love that. That has so much value for coaches. And we're lucky. We have a couple of coaches that have bravely volunteered to be on with us today. So let's bring on Donna first, Ira. And let's talk about, let's put up that matrix, but let's bring in Donna and introduce her. Donna's a newly certified WHY.os coach in Texas with the Action Coach organization. And as you guys are familiar with Action Coach, they're big users of the DISC. That is something they use with everyone. When you go to their BizX meeting every year, everybody introduces themselves using their DISC profile. And Donna saw the value in WHY.os and is a newly certified coach. So I like let's bring it real. Let's bring it to someone we have in front of us. So Donna's why is contribute, her how is make sense, and her what is simplify. So Gary, why don't you introduce Donna just using that part that we know about her, and then we'll talk about her DISC.
So here's what we know about Donna. Donna feels successful when she's able to contribute to something greater than herself, right? Have an impact in other people's lives. How she does that is by helping them make sense of the complex and challenging. Donna is really good at solving problems. What she ultimately brings are simple solutions so that people can actually do something with it, so they can move forward. So how does that feel to you, Donna?
It was when I first did this assessment, I will say it was life-changing for me, because I saw this and I'm like, now it all makes sense looking back. This is what I've been doing, but this like put it all together and was like, wow, hit me over the head.
And what I love what you said there, Donna, because what it actually does is gives you the words to go with the feeling that you had before. So you probably had a sense of your why, how, and what, but now you have the words to go with it so that you can say it. And when you can say it, that's when you know it.
You bet. 100%.
So
there is so much on the screen that is probably being missed at the moment. So let me just take a step back, because Gary, and thank you, Donna, for being here and revealing yourself, and Gary for that great synopsis. But if we just look at this, okay, and this is one of the reasons that I strongly believe that these two need to be married together. Why DISC and Y are the peanut butter and jelly of self-empowerment, is if we look down the list, we have either number 1 or 2 is dominance, right? Everybody that's on this screen. We have a dominant influencer, a dominance influencer, and an influence dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the values that are there. That if you just said, I know what this person wants, I know who this person is because they're a DI or an ID, you know nothing about them. Because if you look at Donna and Gary, there's they both, the what is similar, but how they got there and their why is different.
Yep.
If you look at Rory and me, Rory is a conscientious dominant, and I'm I'm a dominant conscientious. We don't have one single why that is the same. When people would make judgments and go, oh, DC, CD, yeah, you guys are close. You're both task oriented. Who we are, how we're going to get there, what's going to be fulfilling for us, what's meaningful for us is completely different.
Right.
And that's 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 why I say that's why it's the peanut butter and jelly. They go together. It's
right.
And you'll, if you only knew the why or the WHY.os, but not sure how to communicate that with somebody else. So somebody who is an IS trying to communicate with the CD, and maybe when Rory gets on, he can talk about that. It's like speaking to somebody, and that's that conflict. It doesn't mean they're butting heads, but it's like, nah, I don't get you.
Hey, Ira, will you go through what you or Donna go through what the DISC means for those that don't know DISC?
Yeah, so let me take in a next step here. So for those who don't know DISC, and from a lot of the people that are communicating here, it looks like almost everybody does. But DISC is a old. I mean, we're talking millennium old model, and it looked at how people responded to problems, people, pace, and procedures. And 100 years ago, they decided to put some labels on it, and they said, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about dominance, people that are energized by being dominant or direct, people who are energized by being influential, people who are energized by a steady pace, and people that are energized by being conscientious. That's really, I mean, as simple as it gets what they are. So someone like Donna's energized by solving problems quickly. She may be a bit impatient, but she also loves influencing other people to her opinions. Loves interacting, which is another version of the I, interacting with other people. There's a lot of engagement. Donna, I mean, and again, you never like the stereotype, but the majority of people fall into this, much would prefer a meeting rather than a text message. Being face to face rather than, what, put it this way, we're living in this digital world, and some things are just more convenient to do remotely, like this. However, if you're a high I, if you're an influencer, and you needed to chat with somebody and they happen to be in the next room, and you're an I, you'll go over and knock on the door and see if you could do it face to face. I will tell you, if you're low I and sitting on the other side of a screen this far apart, you'll text them. That's just your style. There's no more to DISC than that. It's just, how do I prefer to communicate? And for the I to get up, the low I to get up out of their chair and go over and knock on the door and go, it's so much easier to communicate because I don't have to get in a conversation with them. Right. I don't have to try to influence them. I'm just going to text them and say what I got to do. It's efficient.
Yeah. Let's let Donna, you've been very patient listening to both Dr. Gary and Dr. Wolfe. Tell you about yourself. What are your thoughts as you look through this?
Oh, I'm laughing.
Are they spot on?
I'm laughing because I just did that. I went to the room next door and knocked on the door to have a conversation when I could have texted. So I appreciate that. But yes, and I love
it's
that.
So funny. Yeah, it's so funny. People, we always say this and go, "How did you know that?" And go, "Well, it's observing, and it's been around a while." I just want to throw this up, and I want to. Again, I appreciate both Rory, and we'll get Rory on in a minute, and Donna sharing this, but I think this is also powerful. So for people that know what a DISC graph looks like, and this is just one of the many models, I prefer the 2-graph system because it looks at your natural style. That's your hardwiring. As Gary said, that's who you are. We're not trying to change you. And this says number one's actually, it's a high I, it's an ID. That's the natural style. The adapted style is who you feel that you could be or should be to be more effective. That's your modified style. The adapted style is, how do I adapt to the environment? So Donna, you're really an ID. They're close, so we're not going to split hairs. Might have been 1 or 2 questions that you answered slightly different. But the pattern is very, very similar to both. You are who you are. This is your comfort zone.
Right? Absolutely.
But if you look on the right side where we have Rory, it looks like you got two different people here.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this is a good time to bring Rory on. We want to do that.
Why not?
Bring in the mystery man. There he is.
So we're bringing Rory. So Rory, I mean, we've got you have a similar adapted style, but your natural style is actually, it's pretty even keel. You're what we would call almost situational, but you're actually your highest, although it's not very high, on your natural style is an I, and then you're an S. Right. So where you defined yourself by a CD, you're actually really an IS. That's your hard wiring. But for some reason, and you tell me if this is correct, and you may be able to tell me the reason why, is your adapted style is CD.
Yes, absolutely, all day long.
You're trying to be, you're portraying yourself, or you need to adapt to an environment that's way different than how you would be at home, you know, with your shoes off and t-shirt on and a beer in your hand.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple answers to that real quick. So absolutely my adapted style, how you experience me on a day in and day out basis is CDS, right? So it's that conscientious dominance.
Okay.
And then
I found this on
interacting
the
with
CTS. Check it out.
Oops. Because of the roles that I've had and the positions that I've been in that are high corporate roles, strategy, project management, getting things done, who you experience is CDS. Now, absolutely my natural style, and where I would go if I get under extreme pressure or stress, you're going to experience more of the INS from me. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm Jekyll and Hyde. I'm just going to tell you that you're going to get and experience CDS from me most of the time. And then high stress or high pressure, I'm going to default back to more people orientation. That's the center. That's the IS on the right-hand side of that. So if you look at my Y, and if you go back to those, right,
you would see I'm way more task-oriented. There we go.
So simplify, make sense, right way. All three of those are more related to tasks and getting things done than they are to experiencing people or interacting on the people side. Because I would say how I show up, how you experience me is conscientious and dominance. But the driving force for me is around making things simple. The way I do that is making them make sense to me, breaking them down, putting them back together, and then saying there's a process, a system, a structure that we need to move forward with, which is the right way.
This is so fascinating, Rory, and thank you for sharing all this. Are you, the fact that you have made such a change, and again, anytime when you compare an adapted to a natural that it's greater than 20 or 25%, that's a potential area of stress. That's why people burn out when they make the moves that you do, going from that IS pattern to a dramatic change. That requires a lot of stress, and that's why the why is so powerful, because you said this is who you are and you've been doing it a long time with converting from an IS to a CD. You're comfortable being that CD.
Absolutely.
And the reason you're comfortable, I mean, and we're just doing this on the fly because I didn't meet you until 15 minutes ago or so, and Gary and I and Dan and Nikki were just talking about this the other day, trying to figure all this out. You hit it on the head. Is simplify, make sense, and right way are task oriented. CD is task oriented. Your why allows you to make that dramatic behavioral shift because you know your WHY.os. And maybe it wasn't defined before you completed the discovery process, but you always had a sense of what it was. And
I would tell you
what you do.
Yeah, separate from Donna, where Donna said it was life-changing for her to know what the words were on her WHY.os.
Yeah.
These have been my words forever,
Yeah.
without taking the WHY.os.
And you're able to make that shift. Without that shift, I can tell you that most of the people that I've seen over 30 years who have a dramatic change like that usually get stressed out and burnt out.
Yeah.
That, in fact, when we would do discs with a team or an organization, and we would see the dramatic shifts, we would look at people and just say, that person's ripe to being burnt out, stressed out, or quitting. Unless they were comfortable, and we didn't have the why at that point. We didn't have the WHY.os. Without that, they were just at risk. They were going to just push. They're going to drain themselves. Because I got to tell you, to move from an IS to a DC and do it 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, takes energy. It's exhausting. Because the natural is like a rubber band at rest, and then you twist it into some other pattern. Where Donna is, if we go back to that one, is pretty comfortable,
right,
with this. Not huge shifts here, but Donna, let me ask you this. So if we go back to here, and we look at Donna's who's contribute, if you had Gary's profile, if this was your why, how challenging do you think it might be to make that shift to a DC, if that was what was required in your job?
Well, can I share something with you? When I did DISC for the first time back, I'll age myself, but it was 24 years ago. My DISC profile was a CD. My I was so low, it was almost not even on the chart in my adapted state. And that's because I was an accounting manager and controller. And talk about being stressed out. My natural state was still the same. My adapted state was so different. Mm-hmm. And it really had a lot of questions. I did that for many, many years. And I'm like, what am I doing? Because I feel like I'm not in the right place. Mm-hmm. So that you're talking about being stressed, that was a high level of stress. And then over time, I finally got where I need to be. And being a process oriented person with a Six Sigma background too, better way wouldn't be so much of a challenge for me because I'm all about continuous improvement. But really, as I look at it, I'm like, but that's not my main driver. My main driver is I want to do something bigger than me. I want to contribute to the greater good of society. Could I make it happen? Yes. Does it fit me? Not 100%.
Yeah. I wanted to make a comment, Ira, because one of the things Rory and I laughed about is, his why is simplify. And how long have you had your blog, Rory? And it's called
Simply Put.
Simply Put, yes.
Simply Put. And that's been out there for a while before he knew his WHY.os. So he really does live into that adaptive communication style that he has. Because when we look at Gary, what would you say about Rory based on his WHY.os? I like to say this is someone who is all business. He's going to keep it simple, make sense of it, and then get it the right way. What would you add to that in terms of Rory's WHY.os? Because we didn't get a chance to get your introduction.
Well, Rory has the perfect WHY.os for what he's doing. And, for being somebody that structure process systems, let's make it useful. It's got to be simple. It's got to make sense. It's got to have structure around it. If it does, how do you feel about it, Rory?
That's perfect for me. Looks like I may be muted.
No, we heard you.
Yep.
We got you.
So, no, that's exactly right. I don't like models that have more than 5 things in them, right? So I want 3 or 4. They got to make sense to me first. And then structure, system, process that I can start building on. But I got to get a baseline and a foundation to say, let's improve from here.
Yep. If everybody that owns a business needs a Rory.
Amen.
So. They really do. And I don't know that or maybe you do, but I don't know that yet how valuable, how many people are looking for you. Because when we work with companies and we create that matrix like this, and we can see so often they don't have anybody on their team that can create structure, that can simplify, that can help them make sense out of it. And so they have a lot of ideas, but no structure. So what happens to the CEO when you do a lot of brainstorming and nothing happens?
Get frustrated.
And it comes right back onto their plate. There's nobody they can hand it off to actually get it done. So it stays on their plate and it just becomes very frustrating. And somebody like you, they could hand it off to, you'll simplify what we just talked about. You'll deconstruct it and reconstruct it, and then you'll create structure around it. You're like, wow, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Very, very valuable.
I need to take you on the road. So
Gary, you might be introducing Rory at his next meeting.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and Rory, you know, this is one of the things we talk about at Y Institute. You want to let people know this about you, because when you get introduced at that next keynote that you're giving, you want to make sure that people know that when they're working with Rory, they're going to get ideas that are simple. They're going to get someone who is going to help them make sense of their business, and is going to create a process and a system that they can implement in order to get consistent, reliable results. And that's got to be your language, because that's what you're looking for, the kind of clients. Just like Donna and you guys are there in the make sense and simplify, both of you. Right. So I think that there's a reason you connect, right? And you work well together.
Yeah, it's why we connected 20 years ago and why we still connect today.
You bet. You bet.
So one of the things to notice in the WHY.os is when we talk about your why, if you look at how it's written in the simple WHY.os, you know, when you have your Venn diagram and then below it is the simple WHY.os, if you notice the why part is written in the believe statement. I believe that. Do you know why it's written that way? Because when you articulate what it is you believe, you give the audience or the person you're talking to the opportunity to raise their hand and say, you know what, I believe the same thing. That's what I believe too. And if they believe what you believe, it's a great connection. If they don't believe what you believe, it's not a great connection and they wouldn't be a great client for you. So that's why it's so critical to have the belief part of it. I believe that success happens when we make things simple, easy to use, doable. Now, how I do that is by deconstructing and reconstructing. I make sense out of it. But ultimately, what I'm going to bring is structure, processes, systems for getting predictable and consistent results. So if that's what you're looking for, great marriage. Not what you're looking for, not a great marriage. Does that make sense, Rory?
Yes.
Hey, Gary, I got a question for you, or anybody that's here. So I'm looking at the mix of all the whys and the hows and the whats, and Bruce Kirk made a comment. So thank you, Bruce. You make some great comments here. It sounds like the WHY.os is the bridge between adaptive and natural state, and yeah, that's what we've been talking about. It's the bridge. But if I look at all the whys here, the one that is missing, that is trust. I mean, out of the 5 of us and the 15 different possibilities, not one of us picked trust. Well, not picked, but that's not the biggest why, how, or what. Any thoughts or comments on that? Because I know when we're talking about organizations and we're talking about getting things done and we're talking about culture, we're always talking about people trusting one another. So everybody wants people who trust one another, but everybody is comfortable in their own self here with what we've learned and what we're doing. And not one of our top whys is trust.
Oh, I would love to answer that one, but we've got Gary here. So I'm going to let Gary answer it, because what does it mean when, if trust isn't there, but how do we create trust when it's not in our top 3, Gary?
Yeah, and oftentimes it's assumed trust. I assume that if this is what I do, it's going to create trust, or that trust is already there. It was interesting. That's a great point, Ira, because when we did this with the military, we did it with the Air Force Base, Kirtland Air Force Base here, that comment came up, and one of the servicemen stood up and he said, I just assume that there is trust until there isn't. I haven't experienced that loss of trust when I was younger, to make it that much of a priority for me. It's assumed until I don't have it. It's not, I don't have it until it's proven. And so somebody with the why of trust, trust is that that's the lens with which they view the world. Can I trust this person? Are they going to break my trust?
So for somebody who's a why of trust, you'd have to earn their trust. They won't assume trust until, and then to lose it.
Well, they look at it from the perspective of, can I trust this person? I've had it broken. Trust is that big of a deal for them. What would really be interesting, and we could do this another time, is the WHY.os discovery goes 9 levels deep. We're really only looking at the first 3 right here. The why, how, and what are 1, 2, and 3 of the 9. So when you take the WHY.os discovery, it takes all 9 whys and puts them in order of most important to least important to you. Top 3 are your why, how, and what. We don't know where trust is. It would be interesting to see where trust is for all of us, where mastery is for all of us. That's why it's so valuable to know all 9 levels deep, because then you can have some pretty important conversations about it. If you see trust coming in as 9, you can ask that person about it. So let's talk about this. What does that mean when trust is the least important thing to you? Because I've had those conversations, and what typically is said is, I assume that people are trustworthy. I assume that I can count on them until I can't. But it's I would love to dive into that another time when we have all 9 up here.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at this picture too, and again, this is just a learning experience for me as well, putting all this up and having all these great people having this conversation, is if I can see where this would go in management, is that we need DIs or we need DCs or we need ISs, and then everybody gets stereotyped, and then you have groupthink and everybody sees the world in one way, or we need people who are contributes. But the reality is in order to be functional, and you brought up a great example with Rory, is that, hey, we need people that can simplify, make sense, and do it the right way. We need process people. And you'd be incredibly compatible with me, but we have completely different outlooks on things, of someone who is contribute, better way, and challenge. I'm out to break stuff. I have a better way to break stuff, to challenge the status quo. And you go, that's a great idea. I need Rory to make sense of it, to put the pieces together and to execute.
Yeah.
But if you hire everybody alike with the same why, how, and what and DISC, you may all be compatible, but you won't get anything done.
Right.
Or you won't come up with any new ideas.
Exactly.
Dan, let me ask Donna a question. Donna, how would you go about, and this could be also for Rory, but Donna, how would you go about telling a prospect about yourself from the perspective of your why, how, and what, and your DISC? I know how to do it from why, how, and what, but I wouldn't know how to add the DISC into it. So how would you go about that? Let's say I was a prospect.
I think I would utilize the language about my why and talking about contribute. I'm about contributing the greater good and making people more successful than they thought that they could ever be. How I would do that is by making sense out of complex issues and challenges and organize them in a fashion so I can make it simple and digestible for you to absorb and make it simple for you to implement. If I look at my DISC profile, it's around, I'm quick to make decisions and guide you in areas where you may not be confident in that. And I'm also going to be with you because I like to talk. My IME likes to talk. So I'm going to talk you through these difficult situations and make sure that you understand them in the simplistic form so it's easy to implement.
That's super valuable. I love the way you did that. I would love to know that if I was a prospect. I would have no idea looking at you any of that, right? There's nothing that would tell me what you just told me. But since you now told me that, boy, that really helps me determine that helps me to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want Donna? Is this what I'm looking for, or is this not what I'm looking for? And what you just said, I would be looking for, right? That for me personally, I would be looking for that. But that's very helpful. What did the rest of you think when you heard Donna give that explanation of who she is?
I gave it a thumbs up, Gary, just because one of the other things that we need to, that we can talk about is the fact that sometimes, so Ira and I, with our challenge and in our WHY.os, we're going to need somebody to help us simplify things, right? We're going to come up with a lot of ideas, and I'm going to have a mess of ideas that Donna is going to help me make sense of them, simplify, and take what's important, as would Rory. Right? Rory would do the same thing. He'd say, hey, Dan, let's simplify this. Let me help you understand it. And let's create a process and a system, because nowhere in my DNA is there a place that I'm going to be creating processes and systems. So the need for me to have a coach that can bring that strength is amazing. And Kim Bettel just said in the comments, great elevator pitch. Donna, have you found that to be a great elevator pitch now that you can connect using your WHY.os?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I just did that on the fly. So I'm glad it's being recorded, and I'm going to use it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Gary, I wanted to add a comment on the trust, because you talk about this when you give keynotes. When somebody has the why of trust, that is very important to them. It is the only. It is, you've got to build relationships based on trust. And often it's based on past history where somebody's trust has been broken. And so they look for trust immediately. And you need to know that about a person, because if they have a why of trust, or if trust is in their top 3, and you tell that person you're going to do something and you don't do it, it could be a relationship ender. For those of us on this call where trust is not in our top 3, we're more likely to give somebody a second and third chance, because, as Gary said, trust is assumed. I'm assuming Donna's going to show up on this call, even though I sent her the link only 2 minutes before the call. I'm assuming she's going to be on. And Rory said, you know what, Dan didn't send us the link. I hope he sends it before the call starts. And he assumed that it would be there. Somebody with a why of trust probably would have been checking. Hey, wait a minute, where is it? So it's a different way that we view the world, right? And so that's why it's important to know this about people, so you can communicate with them accordingly. Gary, there's a comment by Bruce, and we're running out of time, but Bruce Kirk, he's got great questions. He says the top 3 whys are defaults, that's where you live, and the other 6 are situational. So he said, can we comment and tease that out?
That's a great, well, let's see. How I look at the other 6 are, the top 3 are super important to you, non-negotiables. The middle 3 are still important to you, but not as important. And the bottom 3 are not very important to you. You don't need to, you don't spend much time over there. Right. But Dan, you've talked about this, and I can't remember who said it to you, but you said, if I work on my 9, the one that's in the 9th place, I will move forward even faster. Correct. Why don't you address what you were talking about there?
Yeah. So that was Ashley Patterson, is one of our coaches in Albuquerque. He talks about working on your 9. So my 9 is right way, structure, processes, and systems. However, even a 1% improvement in my process, systems, and structure gives me exponential results. Right? Because it's something that adds a ton of value to what I do. And so, that's what Ashley talks about, working on your 9. What is your 9? We all want to work in our strengths. And Gary talked about the importance of being who you are, but being aware of your number 9 and doing work in that number 9, just even a little bit, helps you improve tremendously.
A comment that I'd like to make before we finish is that currently, we know what we know.
Right.
But we don't know everything. I don't know everything. I learned something from Rory. I learned something from Donna. I learned something from Dan. I learned something from Ira, from Kirk, from Kim, everybody that's on this. We learn every day more new things. And constantly coaches are sending us things that, hey, did you know this? Hey, have you seen this? Hey, I've been using it like this. What do you think of this? And man, we just have learned so much, and it's just good. We're at the very beginning of where all of this is going to go. I wish I had all the answers. Definitely, I do not. But we're just continually learning from all of you. So thanks everybody for sharing. Kirk, we can dive deeper into what you were talking about there sometime. I'll even give you another example. We've been looking at this for a while, that each of the 9 whys has a different level of assertiveness. How assertive is this particular why? So like the most assertive would be the why of challenge. Maybe the second most assertive would be make sense. The third most assertive would be better way. And we can go all the way through. And when you take somebody's WHY.os and you add up, let's say assertive challenge would be 9, make sense would be 8, 7 for better way. And you add up the total of those, you can see how assertive that person would be. Is this making sense to everybody? And so that's just one example of other ways that the WHY.os is being used. So we're continually finding new ways to utilize it.
Yeah, and a response to Bruce's, and we get this a lot when we were doing business motivators and some of the other tools that I've used over time, is that I would look at it similar to what you did, Gary. The top 3 that's our strengths, that's our being. The middle 3 are situational. And we used to define the bottom 3 as we were indifferent to those. That doesn't, usually we didn't care. They may pop up. They're still part of us. It's not like you scored 0 on those.
Right.
They're still part of your being, and everybody has a breaking point in some point. But on an everyday basis, you'd have to dig down. But you're right. If we're more aware of those, and that's like strengths finders, everybody said, hey, here's my strengths. Here's who I am. I'm not very good at that other stuff. You can't. But eventually, some of those areas that we're more vulnerable on or we're indifferent to become our weaknesses. And that's what you don't want to let it do. You don't want the trust being the 9th, or making sense being the 9th, or doing the right way being the 9th. You don't want that to be your weak link.
Right. So we've got a couple of minutes here. First of all, Rory and Donna, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for adding so much depth to the conversation today. We really appreciate you. I appreciate you. And welcome to Why Society, and thank you for participating. The last thing I'd like to do is, Ira, you're just starting to dig into DISC and WHY.os. Where can people go to find out more?
So here's just an example of one of the things I'm working on. I'm just going to put this up. Actually, I'm working through creating cheat sheets for this. And thanks to Gary and Dan and Nikki, we're trying to simplify it, because that's not one of my top ones. So we're working on simplifying it. And it's like, okay, if you contribute, and you could be one of 4 styles, D, I, S, or C, how would a D approach contribute? Is I'm going to take charge, and I'm going to contribute by becoming the chairman and doing the lead and taking the initiative. But if I'm a high C, I'm going to exert my contribute by making sure everything's done right, precisely, on time, being meticulous, being detailed. We still contribute, but our path to get there is going to be a little different. So we're building these out. So in order to reach out to me, the best place to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. Connect to me there. And many of you are, so just reach out. And then also, if anyone is interested in taking a DISC that they haven't completed recently or haven't done the 2 of them, please reach out, and I'll be happy to send you a complimentary DISC.
Great. Same question for you, Gary. Closing thoughts. WHY.os is a fairly new player in the game of coaching tools. Where can people find out more about WHY.os and how to access it for their clients?
If you're a coach, connect with Dan. He's right there. You're looking at him. Just connect with him. And how should they get a hold of it? Well, you know what, Nikki, could you put in the chat the way to get a hold of Dan? I think it might be in there already. If not, go to whyinstitute.com. There's so many resources for you there. Some great podcast interviews, some great Just so much at whyinstitute.com to really bring you up to speed on WHY.os. And kind of a ending comment, when we first started bringing WHY.os to the world, the mindset was always, well, we're better. This is better. What we have is better than what you have. And it wasn't true. It's not that WHY.os is better. It's collaborative. It works so well together. And WHY.os is just the first step. Once you know the WHY.os, adding the disc adds even more depth and more. You learn so much more, like we just saw with Donna.
Yeah.
If all we knew was your WHY.os, we'd know a lot. But when you added the disc, gave us even more reasons to say yes or no. Yes, I want to work with Donna. No, I don't want to work with Donna. And the same thing would apply to you, Rory. But thank you so much for being here, both of you. Very, very helpful. Really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Likewise.
Thank you, everyone. Ira, thank you so much for bringing this concept together, even though Rory and Donna also had the same idea. There's a lot of genius in this group. So thank you very much. We look forward to the next conversation.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.